We can get so hung up in we have to be here at this time and do this today and this. And I mean, again, I am incredibly guilty of this myself. But when you give yourself that permission to be able to say, like, all right, I don't go to the grocery store today and I go tomorrow. If I don't get this done today and I do it in 2 days or whatever, like it's oh, what's the worst thing that happens? Like it's okay.
Welcome to the Dad Central Show, hosted by Ed Gow Jr. and Drew Solon. We know dads want to see their kids succeed, but they don't always know how to get there. This show gives dads the tools they need to raise confident and successful kids.
What is up, everybody? Ed Gow Jr. here of Dad Central with
Drew Solon of Dad Central.
What's going on, Drew? How you doing?
Well, this morning I've admittedly said I'm tired, but I've had my coffee, so I've got a little more energy. Hopefully that translates into life in my voice. But, some days with a 9-week-old can be long days. Let's just say that. And then, of course, 4 other kids on top of that. But that's the life of a dad. Anyways, how are you, Ed?
I'm outstanding. Just came back from a conference where I was asked to appear on a panel talking about Black media in Canada, and had some really good conversations there, and we'll see where that takes to. And hadn't taken a train in a long time. So it's a great experience, and business class on a train, by the way. So it was one of those things that, once you do business class, if you're taking a train, you don't want to go back. It was very good to take the train to my destination and back. So I'm a little bit tired because I came in late last night, and I've got a full and positive productive day today. But before we go any further, we got to say the Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there is positive impact. So we have another amazing new friend today. So you're going to do the intro.
Yeah, today we're talking with Anthony Palmer. He is the co-creator and host of Wake.Dad.Drink.Repeat, which, as they say, it is the podcast for today's dad. Well, we got a good podcast for today's dad too, but I love the opportunity to connect with him. He is also a dad. He's got 2 kids, and he's got a really unique story of how the show even came about, and then kind of the evolution that he's been on. And so I'm really excited to talk to him and hear more of his story. So Anthony Palmer, welcome to the Dad Central Show. Great to have you.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Good stuff. What's been going on in your world, Anthony?
Oh man, I was gonna say that things have been busy. It's summertime and all that, but then Drew drops that he has 5 kids. So like, what is busy?
Well, you know what? I've got a friend who at one point had 10 kids in his house.
Oh my gosh.
Some of them biological, some of them adopted. And he was commuting and traveling a lot for work on top of that. So I got nothing compared to what he's going through. So it's all relative.
Perspective is a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we're really happy that you've taken time out of your positive, productive schedule to share with us and our Dad Central Show family. And I'll let Drew kick it off.
Well, we love to get a little bit of the backstory, right? How did you, kind of get to this place? And we always like to start by just what was life like for you growing up, and just share a little bit about that and how you kind of got to this point.
It's a great question, and it's funny. It was recently Father's Day in the States, which I don't think is the same Father's Day as it is in Canada. It is the same.
Oh,
okay.
Absolutely.
So we did a Father's Day pod this year. Me and one of my buddies that I've met through the podcasting world, Travis Macy, who has a phenomenal podcast, the Travis Macy Show as well. And we were talking a little bit about this, and just I had a great childhood growing up. My parents are married. They live, 7.5 minutes down the street from us. We see them quite frequently. They're a huge part in my life still, in my kids' lives, which is awesome. I wouldn't trade that for the world. They are our number one support system, and it's just tremendous to have that still. And I'm real lucky. My dad's one of my best friends, and we spend a lot of time together, and it's different now. And this is what we were talking about on the podcast that I think is hilarious. I remember, growing up, looking up to my dad, and always kind of, as we were coming into this stage of life of having kids and everything, you look up to, at least I did. I looked up to my dad kind of as the standard of a dad, right? Of like what I wanted to try to be and obtain. And now it's funny. I almost feel like I get to look up to him as this like standard as like a grandfather now, as a pappy now, and it's something I hadn't really thought about until Travis posed this question to me on our Father's Day pod of like, where you see the future going and everything. And long way of saying, I had a real, I had a great childhood, very close to my family. And it's cool now seeing that kind of like come back around as my parents get to like love on their grandkids that way and interact with them in the same way. So it's awesome, man. I think we go through life and you're like you're very aware of where you are at the time. And I think one thing we all as kids kind of take for granted is just the amount of work that our parents do and like the challenge of doing it all, right? Of, you know, keeping a house, raising kids, working, all of that kind of stuff. And it really is the perspective that I've gained since being a dad and looking back on my parents and the life that we had, like it never felt stressful, never felt crazy, chaotic, whatever. And I look at my kids and I'm like, there's no way they're getting that same vibe at times. Like there's no way it comes across as smooth as it did when we were growing up. But what do you do?
I want to jump in here on the Father's Day just recently passed. And did you take or make any time for reflection?
So I actually got to spend Father's Day morning with my dad. We went out and kayaked and paddleboarded and got up early and we were sitting out on the lake watching the sunrise and just kind of hanging out together for a couple hours. And it was awesome. It was quiet. It was I hate to say business as usual, but like it's not like we had this like big deep moment or conversation. But what was great about it was that it didn't have to be, right. Like we talked about business, and my dad's an entrepreneur, and I was just pinging questions off of him about things that are going on with my current business and where we're at with stuff. And we were talking about a recent, I don't know, charged moment that we had at my house between my parents and me and the kids, because we are very Italian and we wear our emotions on our sleeves. And it was just one of those nights where I was yelling at my parents were yelling at me, the kids were yelling at me, and it was just one of those things. And we were just laughing about it. And, just I don't know, talking about our beach trip coming up and how we didn't want to have that happen at the beach when we were all together in a couple of weeks. But, this is just the way it goes sometimes. So I think the most reflective moment I had about it, Ed, was just that, like a gratefulness, that I got to start the morning with my dad, that I got to then go home and spend the day with my kids. And, it was just it was nice. I've talked about this on the podcast on Wake.Dad.Drink.Repeat many times, but my dad's a 23-year leukemia survivor, and back in 2000 when he was diagnosed, I mean, it was not good. We had a pretty challenging year, and I mean, we're very lucky that dad's still here. And I think that perspective at a young age of all of that and kind of knowing the weight of that, even at age 10, like that was something that I was very aware of and have been very aware of throughout my life. And I think it creates a lot of, life is hard. There's always these moments, these challenges, whatever, but that is a silver lining of that event for us as a family, was that it helped to kind of to give that perspective as we move forward in life.
Thanks for sharing that, Drew.
Yeah, thanks. I think lots of like good stuff. Just as growing up and having that family close by, and then and having still the family together, I think that's a wonderful experience, and I can hear the gratitude that you have, but also that last story, the experience of potential crisis with your dad
Mhm.
and the possibility of him not being here, and what that means to now have him here. And obviously there's a lot involved with that, but maybe if you could talk a little bit about um what where the I guess the most amount of gratitude with kind of the generations falls for you.
I think, and again, we talked about this on our Father's Day episode. Like I, I'm really grateful that I grew up with men in my life, my dad, my grandfathers, my uncles, that are comfortable loving each other and like saying that they love each other and expressing that love for each other. And it's different from person to person, and my mom's side of the family to my dad's side of the family. But um, you know, I very much remember, and still to this day, I mean, I give both my parents big hugs and tell them I love them when I, you know, see them for the last time in that particular event or whatever. And I remember a moment in time in high school realizing how different that was than a lot of my friends with their dads, especially with their dads. And it's just not anything that has ever crossed my mind as odd. And it's something that I love loving on my daughter, right? I mean, she's no longer my sweet little girl. She's now my punk ass teenager that wants to rule the world, you know. She's still sweet, but we're spreading our wings a little bit. And then I've got my little dude Ollie that's just this snug lover little dude, and man, I love loving on that little guy, and we tell each other I love you all the time. And Anderson and I tell each other I love you all the time, but it's something that like I feel really strongly about, like that being a comfortable thing amongst all of us. And I see that in them with other people in our lives. So, like, to the generational question, knowing that, and I'm going to just kind of speak to my dad's side of the family for a minute here, but like knowing that we had that relationship with my grandfather, that I have that relationship with my dad's siblings. He's one of six. I mean, I was just texting with one of my uncles yesterday, and we're going to be at the beach with them in a couple weeks. And we ended the conversation. I was like, all right, man, love you. Like, can't wait to see you. And that still follows through to my kids. That's something that I think is really, it's really important to me. And it's not something that I went into with the intentionality of it being an important thing. I think I just watched it organically develop and was like, oh, okay, this is important. Like, this is something to be mindful of, that this is special and unique to, and not everybody loves their family, right? But like, to be able to express it in that way and it feel natural is something that I'm like, I want my kids to continue that legacy with their families.
That's great. I really appreciate that. Bear with me in a minute as I tell a little bit of a story to connect the dots here. But when I was going to university, I went to West Virginia actually for my first year. Played baseball down there, and my coach had this shirt. It was, those no fear shirts. Do you remember those? Maybe
Yep.
beyond your time because you're a little bit younger than I am. And on the back of the shirt was this statement: "There's nothing more painful than regret." And that always stuck in my mind, and to this day, obviously, I still remember because I thought, man, there's a lot of truth to that. And then the more that I've done this work and I've connected with dads, that there are these experiences that men have or dads have, and they didn't get that, but their dads might have, in a moment towards the end, finally communicated I love you or I'm proud of you. These things that they've been so wishing they could have had, but it came. And then they also express, the dads express, or they even express like regret because there's something that's been missing. It's been lost. And so, for me, what you're talking about is never letting a moment go by without the ability to actually communicate your pride, your appreciation, your love, your feeling for each other as a family. And I just think that's a really powerful takeaway, a really important takeaway, and something that I think you're right. Dads and men, as you said, growing up high school, didn't see a lot of other, of your friends having that experience, but that is very powerful to have that consistently in a family, communicated from your generation to generation.
I think we get, and this is one of those things, and one of the main reasons we started the podcast, just in conversations with me and Mike as friends, as dads, going through these experiences together and being very much wired the same as like softer emotional dudes that are like very happy in that role, right? Like very comfortable with that, right? And an unfair stereotype, but I think in turn it puts people in a corner, like because of this label of like leader, provider, protector. it These are words that don't have like a soft connotation to them, and I would argue that I think it's just as important that we continue to do those things as men, as husbands, as dads, for sure, but that we also are able to do that with a gentleness, with a kindness, with a love, like lead to that. And It's hard, man. I mean, I think now I come from a position where I'm at home or was primarily at home with the kids in more of that type of role. So it's easier, and I'm very, very well aware of that. It's easier to be able to say those things from that position, right? Like my wife is our primary source of income. So she is the provider on that front. Is gone more of the hours. So I naturally get to fall into that role more. But man, I like that role. I struggle so much with this job that I've created for myself, this business that I've created for myself, and my time away from my kids. It's it is this constant battle in my head, and it's me having to remember that this is okay, right? Like that I can do both. I can still have this professional career and continue to grow it and help other people share the stories that they want to share, and still love my kids the way that I want to, spend time with my kids the way that I want to, and do all those other things. Am I spread a little thinner? Yeah, absolutely. Is that a season in life that we're in right now? Absolutely. Right. So it's these are not things that I come to by myself. These are things that I've come to through therapy and 100 and, you know, 50 plus conversations with other dads and listening to other dads share their stories and hear from guys that have kids, 9 weeks old to, uh, you know, grandparents who are raising who have grandkids in their lives. So that that spectrum of conversation that we've gotten to have has really helped me, I think, to be more comfortable in the roles that I play and like being where I am with it all.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's really important when you said, I'm in this season where I want to, be at home and be with my kids and provide that same nurturing environment, but I also it's okay for me to be out doing this, pursuing a business and growing yourself individually and enjoying that aspect of it too, which I think is important. I feel like you use the word struggle. um, would you be able to talk a little bit more about like that? What is that internal struggle that you go through in those moments or in this process season that you're in now? And then if there's anything that you've found that's helped you work through that.
Well, this could be like a 3-hour conversation. So, you you want the like the struggle piece. So here we go. No, man. I mean, it's the struggle is. I think I I came in, and we can run down this road here in a minute too if you want, but I shared with you a little bit before we came on. And again, if anybody has listened to our podcast or gotten on our website and read any of this, like I've been very transparent and open about a lot of this. So you can go find all of this information elsewhere if you want. Um, I came into my daughter's life when she was 2, and was fortunate enough to get to adopt her when Michelle and I got married. And through a couple years of some infertility and IVF and miscarriages and this, that, and the other, we end up getting pregnant with Oliver naturally, and got this 7-year age gap between these 2 kids and live in very different lives with them at times. And, we're done. We're not having any more. And I'm great with that. But it's the perspective of this kind of season, this chapter coming to an end with Oliver being home. He starts kindergarten in August. Um, I've had so much fun adventuring with him over the last couple years, and I think I went in a good way. I went hard in the paint with it because I knew, one, that it was the end of that for me, and two, that I didn't get to do a lot of that with Anderson. Now, I mean, we did a ton, but I didn't get those first couple years of that experience with her. So it almost felt like, and this is something that I've come to over time. This isn't just a thought that I had in the moment, but like it felt like making up for lost time a little bit on some of that. And so I think some of the grief, the guilt, the struggle is that like this is it, right? Like I've got, starting in the middle of August, I'm going to be dropping both my kids off at school at 7:30 in the morning and picking both of them up somewhere between 3 and 3:30, and that's Monday through Friday, and it's a 25-minute drive home, and that puts us at 4 o'clock when we get home, and then it's homework, dinner, hang out for a minute, bath, bed, you know, rinse and repeat, and or drink and repeat, however you want to look at it. Um, and I I'm struggling with that this summer a little bit. Like I want to capitalize on as much time I have with these guys right now, because I'm only gonna have a summer with them at 5 and 12 one time. I'm only gonna have a summer with them at 6 and 13 one time, and it's like I had to give myself permission to feel that and to acknowledge like that that's okay. And then I kind of came to this thought at the beginning of the summer of like, all right, so this you have this feeling. You've also built this business, and there's a lot of people who are relying upon you, and you're doing good work with it. So what's the middle ground here? So I decided that I was gonna try to take Fridays off every summer or every week during the summer, and really be intentional about spending Fridays with the kids. Now, thankfully, I have a really great business coach, and she was able to help frame a lot of that with me of like, so what does that look like? What does that actually mean to you? And it's been awesome. Like this week, Friday's not the day that we're going to do it, but yesterday was the day. I spent almost the whole day with the kids yesterday. Oliver was at camp. Anderson and I got to have just some us time for the first couple hours of the day. It was super fun. We just talked and hung out with no real agenda. And it was like I felt that bucket be filled at the end of the day yesterday. Did I stay up late working last night to get caught up on stuff? Yep. But like I knew that was going to be what it was. So it made that moment with them easier to be able to just be present in that time. And I know like I I know the question you asked, I just put a nice positive spin on it there at the end, but this is not like just this is not easy. This is not something that I just came to, right? This has taken work and conversations with people to get there with this. And I'm not perfect at it. I don't execute it well every day by any means. I want to take those moments that feel scary, that change, that newness of like losing these moments with them at times, and just be okay with knowing that that change is a good thing. It's just going to keep evolving, right? And that ability to just kind of continue to be present in those moments when we can, that's what's so important.
Mm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I think that last point in particular is really important. Being willing to be, being able to be present. But the key I also find is knowing that you can have these moments planned out,
Hmm.
but they can also shift and
Hmm.
adjust. But that's okay. And as long as you're able to commit to the time that you've set aside to do what you're going to do and recognize there's going to be a trade off, then you just go about doing it, and staying present. So that's
Ryan
definitely, I think,
Holiday,
important.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Ryan Holiday, I don't know if you guys have read any of his books, but one of my favorite authors. I love philosophy. I love his ability to digest it and give it to us in a more bite-sized go. But he wrote this book called Perennial Seller, and it's not one of his more like, I mean, it's a well-known book, but it's probably not one of his like higher up ones as far as getting attention goes. But he talks about what makes something work, right? Like
Mm.
why a work of art stays in the focus of the world for years over years, or why a song stays for 20, 30, 40 years popular, whatever. And it's this idea of people being able to be flexible. That just because
Mm.
you have an idea and you think it's a good idea doesn't mean that it's perfect, right? Like that you have to be able to be fluid with some of that. And I think I took that lesson when I was trying to start not this business, but a business prior. And that was like this real focal point for me of like, all right, I have my idea, but why I don't need to be fixed on that. Like I need to be able to roll with the market. I need to be able to adjust. And it's funny how much that lesson really applies, I think, to parenthood, not just fatherhood, but parenthood in general, right? Like we can get so hung up in we have to be here at this time and do this today and this. And I mean, again, I am incredibly guilty of this myself. But when you give yourself that permission to be able to say, like, all right, I don't go to the grocery store today and I go tomorrow. If I don't get this done today and I do it in 2 days or whatever, like it's what's the worst thing that happens? Like it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a conversation with Paul Sullivan, founder of the Company of Dads, and he was talking about the lesson learned from the book that he had written. And it was really about success, and the highest achievers. And he talked about the core skill, which was essentially adaptability. So you talked about flexibility, which is very, going to like the twin brother, twin sister of
Sure.
adaptability, right? They support each other. And so, but that ability to do that on a consistent basis is what helps people perform at very high levels under intense duress, right? And so that's certainly such a crucial skill. Are you a dad who feels like you're juggling a million things at once? Balancing work, family, and personal goals can be overwhelming. But what if there was a solution? That's why we created our new fatherhood community called Dad Mentor. For over 20 years, Dad Central has built practical tools to help dads. We understand the challenges you face and provide the support you need to thrive. The biggest complaint we hear from dads is there's no dedicated support for their specific needs, but not anymore. Our new community, called Dad Mentor, is here to transform your fatherhood experience. Imagine feeling in control, staying calm and patient when your children misbehave. Picture yourself connected to your children, guiding them with confidence and watching them succeed. When you join Dad Mentor, you'll have access to a community of like minded dads committed to their dad journey, just like you. You'll also get the Dad's Roadmap. This is a step by step plan to help you go from unsure to unstoppable as a dad. Monthly masterclasses and Q&A sessions. You'll get answers and know exactly what to do straight from experts. Monthly group meetups that connect dads over common topics. A dad's resource library. Curated webinars, podcasts, or guides built by Dad Central to help you grow as a parent. And finally, you'll also get exclusive members-only offers and events. Now, many dads do try to do this fatherhood thing alone, only to find themselves trapped in frustration and strained relationships. Then they may turn to unhealthy coping mechanisms like drugs, alcohol, or other distractions, leaving their family and their own well-being at risk. We don't want you to reach that point of regret. Take steps to invest in you and your family today. Join Dad Mentor and go from stressed, tired, and overwhelmed to confident, calm, and connected. Join us today by going to dadcentral.ca/dads.
Palmer, I get a sense that you really value fatherhood. Was it always the case then, or was there a moment saying, you know what, I really value this thing, being a father?
I think I knew I always wanted to be a dad. I knew I always wanted to have kids. I don't know that I know the scale with which I intended to do that, or the path that I would have thought I would have gotten there. I mean, if you had asked me prior to having kids, if I thought my journey into it was going to be adoption to start, and then, basically like just this path through hell with all of what if so many people go on, right? With this path of miscarriages and IVF and all of this. So I certainly never thought that was going to be my journey to it. The day Michelle and I got married, and we had talked with Anderson a little bit about like, what all this meant and blah, 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 but never like forced anything with her on it of I'm dad now, or, I mean, really didn't even like have that conversation. And we got done saying our vows, and we came walking down the aisle to go to the reception. And Anderson was our flower girl, but was up there with us the whole time. And she came walking behind me in between us as we were walking down the aisle, and she pulled on the back of my coat, and I looked down, I was like, "Hey, what's up?" And she's like, "Hey, Anthony, I get to call you dad now, right?" And I was like, yeah, I guess." Like it just totally was this like very, innocent moment with a kid, right? And we got out to the reception. We came in with our bridal party and everything, and we had decided that Anderson and I were going to do a dance together, just like Michelle and I would, or my mom and I, or Michelle and her dad, or whatever. And huge Jimmy Buffett fans. And Anderson and I used to just rip around town with windows down and Buffett blaring in the spring and summertime, and had so much fun doing that. And there's a song on his Fruitcakes album called Delaney Talks to Statues. And it's about just this like little spunky creative kid and her imagination, and her dad watching her with her imagination. And it's Anderson, like it's just to a T, right? And so I had picked that song for us. Guys, I cried like a baby for like 3 minutes. I mean, just was holding her, bawling my eyes out,
Mm.
and like we were kind of laughing and talking. I mean, it ripped me apart. And then of course, the song gets done. She's like, "Dad, I'm gonna go play with my friends. Bye." I'm like, "It's fine. Go do whatever you need to do." you know. So I think in that moment, without having really spent a lot of time thinking about it. I mean, obviously I had thought about it, but I don't think I had thought about it in that way. And I think those two moments were pretty like foundational of like, oh, okay, this is it. This is what this is. And I think then watching Oliver come into our lives and him be born and the journey we went through with that, it was it was different because of really the trauma and the fear leading through that journey. But again, it was just another one of those moments that was like, this is very concrete here. Like, this is what this is. Ed, I'm sorry. I don't know that I totally answered your
No,
question.
no, you're good. You're all good. You're good. You're amazing storyteller. I'm going to see if I can get another quick conversation piece in. From what you've shared with us, you've had a strong male lineage, father, grandfather, etc. How has that lineage impacted your journey as a dad?
So I always like question myself in these conversations because my dad traveled a lot when we were growing up. So my mom was like very present in our lives and still obviously, still is. And I'm very as close as I am with my dad, I'm probably closer with my mom. We talk almost every day at some point via text or a phone call or something. And a lot of that I think was growing up kind of being that person in the house with dad traveling the way he was. And I think some of it probably boils back to some thoughts that got seeded in my head of him not being around and blah, 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 blah. So I I think that it's I don't know, it's just important to me to be that role model, that I feel like my dad was to us to like just I don't and it's probably a negative thing to some extent if I'm being totally honest. Like I saw my dad be able to do everything all the time. And dad would tell you now that like he sacrificed sleep and made some bad choices on that front to be able to get it all done. And I think I run with this burden to some extent of like I have to do it all the time. And that sometimes makes me grumpy and makes me, you know, resentful of others and this, that, and the other. And that's not great. But it's like I think I'm able to be more and more aware of when that's what the emotion is that I'm feeling about it, like when that's what's really pulling me down with it. So I don't know. I think it's hard when you look up to, and this isn't like a criticism of him, but like it's hard when you look up to something that you feel like is this standard that is just impossible to freaking get to, you know?
Well, I mean, that's interesting. I was gonna maybe go in a different direction, but I feel like that's an interesting point and one that might be worth exploring if you're open to it. Because I mean, I think about that as a dad, right? I have been traditionally hard on myself as a dad, and then recognizing that as I see my kids grow, that trait developing in them,
Hmm.
they don't perform a certain way and they then get down or are hard on themselves too. And I'm like, man, I kind of want to change that.
Hmm.
I want to change that. And I recognize the best way to change that is I've got to change it for myself. So I've got to, as Ed, as a perfect co-host for me says, give yourself grace. It's one of his key
I
lines. And I'm
love
like,
that line,
I
Ed.
really got to work on that actually for myself so that I can live that for my kids. But I think I don't want my kids to maybe have that same type of expression that you just had, right? Not because, as you said, it's necessarily a negative or bad thing because you really look up to and admire your dad, but there's still this element of, I'd say, pressure or, you've got to do it all. And so I wonder if we could talk a little bit about that point, because as a dad, I want to change it, and I'm curious to know like what your thoughts are on if your dad could have done anything different, what might change it, or how you're even working through it yourself now.
I don't know that he could have done anything different. I think knowing his line of work and his schedule and stuff, like it was one thing I'm very grateful of is when he was home, he felt very present, like, and we would do things together as a family. And again, I think kind of going back to where we started this conversation, the calmness that I felt growing up that I don't feel like exist in my household at the
Mm,
level that it did. But I also think Travis said this to me on our Father's Day episode. He's like, kids are for a reason very self-absorbed. Like you're very focused on what's going on in front of you, not everything else around you. So maybe it was just as chaotic and crazy. I don't know. It didn't feel that way to me. And maybe my kids don't feel that way. It's not a conversation I've had with them because honestly, I don't know that I'm ready to hear the answer one way or another.
okay.
um,
Honest. It's good.
but I think something that maybe answers your question, but like while I'm hard on myself about a lot, I think I like to have, especially with Anderson, because she's older, I feel like we can have those conversations. I like to talk about the failures, the challenges. Like I
Mhm.
don't like her. I don't like the Instagram filter, right? Of life. It doesn't do anything for me. I don't think it teaches any real value to the kids with anything.
Mm,
And I've shared this example before, but like a way that I find very easy to have that conversation with her is like, I love to work out. I love to run, love to ride my bike, love to lift weights. My kids know that that's an important thing to me for so many reasons. And I don't talk about it with them all the time, but what I really do try to do is I do try to have those conversations with Anderson when I have a really hard workout, when it doesn't go the way that I wanted it to go, right? When it kicked my butt, when I lost to it, when I maybe had to throw in the towel and run 3 miles instead of five, or when I had to like give up on the last couple intervals, or when my paces were off or whatever. But like, and not to like, the reason I have that conversation with her is because I want her to understand that like things are hard and sometimes we have to work through those hard things, or we have to understand when like I just don't have it today, and that's okay too, right? Like I can't always do everything all the time the way that I intend to be able to do it. And I don't regret that I didn't have those conversations with my dad. I don't wish that he had had those talks with me or whatever. I don't, because I don't, at the time, again, I don't think I knew that. I just think now, as I look at my life and think, here's all the things that have to get done, right? Mom and dad were always able to do all of those things. Like, and it's a survival tactic. We have to do them. Somebody has to do all of this stuff at the end of the day. Right. So it's just kind of like you grind and go on it. And yeah, so I don't know. I don't know that I have a great answer to that question.
no, it's good. I was just more curious, and I think the just exploring it and talking about it is valuable. So I appreciate that. Ed, over to you.
Well, let's talk about Wake, Dad, Repeat. What's that? How did that journey start? Where did it come about?
So I think I shared a little bit with you guys before we started, but my good buddy Mike Smith and I felt like there was a need for there to be a conversation about the real side of fatherhood, right? Like to this conversations that we got to have when we were on runs together, when we were riding our bike together, when we were sitting around the campfire drinking a bourbon together, when we were, whatever, the conversations that I think a lot of us as men have with a select group of our peers, or maybe we don't have that group of peers to be able to have that conversation with. So we wanted to have that. So, full transparency, we started and thought, we can do this. We can have conversations just us and talking about this. And we realized probably within the first 3 or 4 episodes just how boring we actually are and that we needed some guests. So we started reaching out to folks, and I was absolutely blown away by the amount of people who actually wanted to come on and have this conversation. All walks of life, all levels of fame and fortune and whatever. And I think the reason is that so often as men, we are labeled by our jobs, our profession, our success in life on that front. And I don't think given that chance to have this conversation that I do think is a lot of us want to have. So what we found, what I was incredibly blown away with is the amount of vulnerability that we got out of these men that we got to speak with on the show. People coming on and talking about their failures, their challenges, uh, talking about being raised in a home without a dad and what that meant for them, of what they wanted to give to their kids. I mean, we've seen it all. So it's been an incredible journey. It's one that I was just thinking before we came in and did this today. I walked into my office and was looking around and was like, this is really cool that I'm getting ready to do this podcast with you guys. I don't know, 4 years later on this journey that I've started this business, all of this because of this podcast, and this growth that's gotten to come with it and the connection. I've met just some incredible people and have gotten to continue to call a lot of them friends or colleagues or acquaintances or people that I've still been able to stay in touch with. And it's just incredible. And I'm, again, I find it an honor, and I would love to hear your guys' take on this. Like, I find it a real honor and privilege to be able to share the stories that we get to share. That I can reach out to somebody, have them agree to come on and talk, and that they are comfortable with us holding that story and putting it out into the world, about something that is so personal and real and raw to so many of us. And I I don't take that lightly. So anyway, I mean, how do you guys feel about that? If you don't mind me turning the mic on you for a second.
I find it an absolute blessing to be able to provide a safe and brave place for men and those who love them, and fathers and those who love them, to share, because it not only makes me feel better, but I'm doing good,
Yeah.
right? At the
Yeah.
bottom line, and just feeling the purpose that it's bigger than us, right? So uh, because there's many fathers out there and men out there that are screaming and nothing's coming out. And I'm just praying and hoping that through these conversations that we have, you have, and others like us have, that we can make them come out in just in their heart and their soul, saying, hey, I can relate to that. Oh, I see that. Or I'm a little bit less stressed. So I think it's a real blessing, and I don't take it for granted.
Yeah.
Well, Ed, so well said. I'm not sure I can follow up, but I'll share. You know, it's a combination of every conversation that I have, I learn something,
Yeah.
and I'm one of those men who didn't have a fantastic experience with my own father, and always felt a void, and just a heartache of not having what I felt others might have had with their dad growing up. And so, in essence, for me, there's a little bit of almost healing that happens when I have these conversations and I hear these stories, and I feel like, oh, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one out there who's gone through this, and I know that intellectually, but every conversation almost brings a little bit of like, oh, this is okay, I can connect and relate to another person on this area that is a little bit painful, but certainly very important to me. Then the other part of it is really aligned with what Ed was saying is I think there are a lot of others out there who don't have the space to share their own story.
Mhm.
But hopefully through the process of hearing a someone else's story, they can feel okay. They can feel inspired. They can feel motivated. They can feel encouraged that okay, I can actually do this. And so our goal is for me, it's that they are able to leave a conversation and take and apply to their actual life something that they heard through the show today. And I feel so that really speaks to what Ed was talking about. We're helping others and we're supporting them, and the biggest impact for me is I think literally if you start at home, you can change the world. And if we had more engaged fathers, uh, we would see a radical shift. I think as families grow, as children grow, and they become healthier, stronger, more resilient, kinder, gentler, respectful adults. And so, yeah, there's a big purpose for me in all of that.
And I
You
think it
got me
even
talking now, so I'm gonna stop though and turn the questions back to
no, I
you.
love it. I love
Can
it. Those are
I'm
great.
just gonna add one more thing. For
Please.
me, it's not hard work, it's hard work.
Yeah. And I think, eh, Drew, it's like it almost starts a step before home. It starts like within us, right? And I think
Mm,
that's that growth work where it's everything that Ed just said. Like and you said it's giving people that opportunity to not scream in silence, right? To not
mm,
feel this burden by yourself. We've made very little money off of the podcast, over the years. And originally when we started it, there was this idea of like, all right, let's figure out how to monetize this. Let's make this a thing. Let's sell hats and t-shirts and, have events. And I love that, man. And if it ever turns into that one day, fantastic. I could care less about ever making a dollar off the show.
mm,
It's I mean, it has provided for me in so many other ways and continues to provide for me emotionally on so many
mhm,
levels. The thing that is the most beneficial of it, and I do not mean this in a cheesy way, is that connection piece that you guys were just talking about. So
yeah,
we've talked a lot about stuff that I would never thought we would have talked about on the show, right? Like especially in the sense of like the miscarriages and the IVF side of things. And there's so much for our wives, our partners that they're going through during those processes. And that is very physical and very real. Right.
Mhm.
And like,
Yes.
again, to this provider protector role, we want to make sure that they're okay. But there's this whole emotional side for men during that just is not talked about. I mean, straight up, can't find it. I think it's becoming more and more and more talked about and present. But man, I get so much feedback from people when we have episodes where we talk about that.
Mhm.
Hey, thank you for saying this. This is what I'm going through right now. Hey, I went through this too. I never thought about it this way, this, that, and the other. And that right there, that piece alone is worth it all. Just knowing that we're providing connection, that we're normalizing these conversations.
Mhm.
Um, our old tagline was, that it's the podcast for today's dad. And you're spot on at the beginning of this, man. There's plenty of shows for dads, right? We are not the only one, but what I do feel like we do really well, what we've done really well over the years is that we have normalized the conversation around fatherhood, right? We've taken this filter off of it a little bit and have said to everybody who listens that wants to hear this message, hey, it's okay to like feel these things. It's okay to admit that you're struggling on things. It's okay to whatever that emotion may be. And there is a group of people who are feeling that same thing and
Mhm.
are willing to connect and talk about it.
Yeah. And the other aspect, yeah, exactly. 100%. And the ability to connect with other dads or people who believe in that same message is, I think, immeasurable, right? The power of community, the power of, just alignment in message or in principle. And as you said, those connections have become friendships
Hmm.
and that you've learned from and that you support each other with. And so to me, that's the really powerful piece, because we know that when you have community, when you have support, when you have this social connectedness, especially through the season that we've just gone through, it's like a high beam, like right in your face. You
Yeah.
need social connectedness, and what more important or powerful way to support yourself and to support others in this most important area, fatherhood. So very powerful. So, Ed, and turn over to you.
I don't know. There's so much more we could say. I almost want to do a part two, really and truly. But let me ask you, how can people get in touch with you in this wonderful podcast you do?
Sure. So part two, let's do it. We can pick it over on Wake.Dad.Drink.Repeat if you guys
Yep.
want. We can pick it
Yep.
up there. I would be
Okay.
honored to have both of you guys on and continue the conversation and hear more of your guys' story. So yeah, you can find us all the places. It's Wake.Dad.Drink.Repeat.com. You've got links to our Instagram there. You can find us on Apple, on Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. Again, Instagram at Wake.Dad.Drink.Repeat. I think at Anthony Palmer. We've got our podcast production company, Palm Tree Podco. There's a lot of shows that share very similar stories to the ones that we've talked about here today. We've got a whole network of shows that I'd be honored for anybody to check out and hear those stories that we get to play a part of telling. And I am always looking for more guests for the pod, dynamic people, whatever. If anybody's interested in coming on and sharing their story or has a recommendation of somebody they want to hear from, holler at me. That's again, it's that community piece. So would love to say hey, would love to hear from anyone.
Well, before we let you go, I want to say thank you so much for everything you've done as a dad, past, present, and future. I really appreciate your heart and your openness and knowing that you're not there and it's a journey and you're having fun along the way. And hey, it's a roller coaster at times, but I know I hope I can speak for Drew on this. You're just doing it, and we're with you. So thank you for taking the time. Really appreciate it. Drew, any last words?
Well, thanks for the opportunity. Looking forward to staying connected and supporting each other.
Yeah,
Uh,
thanks guys. I appreciate you reaching out and I appreciate your patience in us getting this
That's
recorded.
okay. You were
And
worth it, buddy. You were worth it.
well, thank you. And
I got 5 kids. I'm learning to be patient.
well, we will figure out a time to rock part 2 of this, and hopefully it won't take as long in between. But yeah, thank you guys for the opportunity. Thank you for what you guys are doing
Right
and
back.
sharing the stories the way that you do. It's just important that we continue to share these stories and have these conversations. And it's an honor to be on the dad team with you guys.
Thank
Sounds
you.
great.
Well, remember to give yourself grace and don't just manage your time, manage your energy. Be well.
See you guys.
Take care. All right, Drew.
How about we start with you this time?
Me?
Switch it up. Yeah.
Okay. I have no difficulty. What I got from this conversation, so many different things. One that pops out is the relationship with his dad. That really, how many dads spent time with their dads if they're around on the Father's Day, and also being so nice and open about the journey having their second child. Not easy, challenging, but just such a reward, and just the wonderful passion and him sharing the dips and the mountains.
Mm-hmm.
Fatherhood is dips and mountains, but being persistent and consistent is the thing. And that's one of the things I love about Palmer, is just his consistency. He knows that he knows the prize. He knows he has his eyes on the prize, regardless of circumstance. And as he said, there can be challenging moments, but he keeps his eyes on the prize, his children and his family.
Nice. Well said. Well, I'm done. I don't need to say anything else.
Why not? I'm not doing this on purpose. I just love the eyes on the prize, and and him also being open up, saying, "Hey, I got to make the most of this summer, because in September, I got to drive both my kids to school." So being intentional and seeing ahead and saying, "You know what? I got to make the most of the time I have now."
Drop the mic.
Okay. All right. So I guess what we'll do next.
Let me.
Go ahead.
just
Go ahead. Yeah,
I think there's a key point he made around the feedback he gets when he shares the story, the realness, the rawness of those hard, difficult moments, those things, the grief, the pain, the struggle. And I think it's, I could very much relate to that because of my own struggle that I've had at times in the fatherhood journey. And the most important message maybe to take away from that is it's okay. And there is a way through it. And if you can't even share your story, then maybe hearing someone else's story will let you know you're not alone. It's going to be okay. You will get through this. But there are also places you can go to get some support, some help, and you got to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Oh
Absolutely.
yeah, actually I am going through this. So that was, I think, really important, and I'm just glad that it was able to be shared.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And as I say, dads, you're born to win. You weren't born to lose. Right? So as always, I want to say the Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care believes that care is the best of a man, because when men care about themselves and others, there's positive impact. As we finish up here, hey, you can listen to these epic conversations just like this one at dadcentral.ca/podcast. Hey, email us. Tell us what you think. Give us guest suggestions. Tell us what you like, what we can improve on. Because there's always, like every dad, every human being, there's room for improvement. And then finally, website address, dadcentral.ca. We have a lot of free resources there. And also, hey, share the podcast out. Rate the podcast. Tell us what you like, wherever. So as always, I like to say, remember to give yourself grace, and don't just manage your time, manage your energy. And we'll see you soon. Take care.